I wanted to start out by giving you a little bit of context of why this play was just so mind-blowing at the time it was created. Um, the year it was published, 1947, the Oscar-winning movie the year before had been It's a Wonderful Life. And with Jimmy Stewart, you've probably seen it. It shows every Christmas, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. It was our version of the Christmas Carol. It was a very wholesome America. I talked about Ozzie and Harriet in those shows, and I gave you the Stephanie Kuntz article. And I'm going to delve in, and if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read a little bit to you out of Scene 6. This is page 114 in my book, and this is when Blanche and Mitch go on their date, and she's explaining what happened to the boy that she married when she was a teenager. And I'm not going to do the Southern accent because I'm not an actress. I just want to point out a really important monologue. He was just a boy when I was a very young girl. When I was 16, I made the discovery of love, all at once and much, much too completely. It was like you suddenly turned a blinding light on something that had always been half in shadow. That's how it struck the world for me. But I was unlucky, deluded. There was something different about the boy, a nervousness, a softness, and tenderness, which wasn't like a man's. Although he wasn't the least bit effeminate looking, still, that thing was there. He came to me for help. I didn't know that. I didn't find out anything till after our marriage, and we'd run away and come back, and all I knew was I'd failed him in some mysterious way, and I wasn't able to give the help he needed but couldn't speak of. He was in the quicksands and clutching at me, but I wasn't holding him out. I was letting him slip in. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything except I loved him unendurably, but without being able to help him or help myself. Then I found out, in the worst of all possible ways, by coming suddenly into a room that I thought was empty, which wasn't empty, but had two people in it, the boy I had married and an older man who had been his friend for years. Afterwards, we pretended that nothing had been discovered. Yes, the three of us drove out to the Moon Lake Casino, very drunk and laughing all the way. We danced the Varsa Nova. Suddenly, in the middle of the dance, the boy I had married broke away from me and ran out of the casino. A few minutes later, a shot. It was because, on the dance floor, unable to stop myself, I had suddenly said, I saw, I know, you disgust me. And then the searchlight, which had been turned on the world, was turned off again, and never for one moment since has there been any light that's stronger than this kitchen candle. So Alan Gray was her husband, and he was gay, and he surely loved her very much, but he was using her for protection from the world because, of course, homosexuals were treated as criminals at the time. And the reason that he took his own life was not only that she discovered him, but that she whispered, you disgust me. And the music that was playing during that dance when she said that to him plays in the back of her head at her most stressful moments throughout the play. And you'll see that in italics saying stage direction. So if we were watching the play, we would hear that music and we would know that Blanche is starting to lose a grasp on things. So that music is very symbolic. We've talked about literary symbols, and I also have created a list of literary terms that's available on Web Study, and you've had it in the Gardner book as well. Another symbol that's significant in that passage that you'll see throughout the play is light. Usually we think of light as something as shining the truth on things, right? Like the detective shining the bright light on the suspect, making them tell the truth, or light as being good and pure. And you can think about the Chinese lantern Blanche wants to hang up to kind of hide her age and also create an aura of magic and romance in the area she's sleeping in. She doesn't like light directly on her face because it shows her age, and she tries to claim she's Stella's younger sister. She doesn't want her dirty past, her secrets, all of her affairs to come out into the light. There's the naked light bulb. There's all these symbols of light that'll come throughout the play. Music is symbolic, the polka music. Also, there's a song called Paper Moon that Blanche sings, and if you want to talk about music, lyrics, symbolism, I suggest you look up the lyrics to that because it's very much about facades and creating a world that could only be true if the person loved you back. just so much going on in that passage. So one of the huge themes in here is, of course, artifice, pretending you're something you're not, and light, exposing the truth. Other themes, of course, are alcoholism, domestic violence, gendered spheres when they collide. So when I say gendered spheres, at this time, it was still typical the woman would stay home, be part of the family unit, take care of home base, so to speak, and the husband would go out in the world, and the male sphere was, the business world, or in Stanley Kowalski's range, it was also the bowling or polka. And when the women are at home, and the poker game collides with the female sphere, where Mitch and Blanche are trying to have their conversation, and the girls are trying to listen to music, and Stanley is drunk, and everything collides, and Mitch just keeps saying, women should not be present at a poker game. This is not for women. That's something that keeps being examined. Another theme is the female dependence on men. Blanche keeps having illusions about some past boyfriend giving them money and they can open a store and run away. But she was a poorly paid school teacher. Even women who worked like school teachers really didn't make enough to survive. Barely, perhaps. But she no longer has that job, as we know. And women were completely dependent on men. And that's something that the author's also looking at. So many key themes. And if you watch the bio video on Tennessee Williams, that he himself was gay. He himself had a father that was a lot like Stanley. His mother and his sister kind of inspired Blanche. But there's so many things to think about. One term I want to make sure that you get, you can see that. Oh, of course it's going to be backwards for you. If you look through, does it show through? No. Character foil. Anyway, a character foil is two characters that are so different, they highlight each other's characteristics. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, you can think of Albus Dumbledore is everything good and gentle and loving and pure and good magic and cares about Harry and is quirky and delightful, versus Voldemort, who is darkness and pure evil and revenge. And when you put them together, they just highlight each other's specific qualities. You could also consider Batman and Robin to some degree. If you've seen the old TV show, that Batman just looks darker and more serious and stronger. If Robin's the short little pipsqueak, what we're going to do next, Batman, next to him. You put them next to each other and they highlight each other's differences, and that's really significant. And that comes to play very often in Streetcar Named Desire. Particularly if you want to write about gender, think about Mitch and Stanley. And I don't want to give the answers to you, but just think about what kind of masculinity Stanley represents, like his definition of what it means to be a man, and then what kind of man Mitch is in comparison. Because when you look at them together, their differences just stand out glaringly. And Williams is really trying to show us something. To some degree, also, Blanche and Stella are so different, and their take on what's going on. So many interesting things are happening. And I think you've already gotten the gist. This is not a comedy. It is a tragedy. It's not going to end up happy, but you need to think about what the author was trying to accomplish. Because again, this wasn't for people to sit home and read on a Friday night. They were to go to the theater and sit down and watch actors play it out in front of them. And what were they going to leave that theater with? What new ideas, what new feelings, what new understandings? So that's something to think about as you write your papers. So I gave you 2 suggested topics. One is he's kind of showing us an America that no one was talking about, and that could just be the amalgamation of races coming together, looking at families that weren't middle class, weren't rich. It could be looking at areas of the country that weren't usually considered, themes, what's going on behind closed doors, domestic violence, alcoholism. You could look at that, like what he's trying to show us about the real America versus the cookie-cutter America that we were getting from Jimmy Stewart movies. The other suggestion I gave is writing about gender, because there's so much going on about that in this play that I really, you could write me a book, but it only needs to be 3 pages, 4 pages, excuse me. One thing I want you to avoid is, I know there's a tendency, and I've been there too as an undergraduate, when you're writing papers and you're not quite clear on what you're writing, you fill it with fluff, which is you kind of write about nothing, or you talk about gender like you understand what gender was like in the 40s, but you didn't do the research and you don't understand. So just make sure you're coming from a place of authority and you understand your topic. Read the Kuntz article I gave you. Think of the historical context of the time and what we can extrapolate from the play itself. Use your secondary sources. And then the same thing with your posts, which have been great. Just make sure you're using quote specifics from the play and your sources.